Good afternoon. Welcome. And welcome to all of you watching via the internet. Today we're going to be talking about a subject near and dear to my life, literally, and that's the 8 natural laws of health. I call them the natural laws of health because of my background. You see, I was employed as an engineer in the defense and aerospace industry. Although I considered myself a scientist, having had a degree in physics. And I used to argue with all of the people there in the engineering management and say, no, you're an engineer. And I said, no, I'm a scientist. You know, and so I was called the boy scientist for a lot of years. But I began to realize that I had more fun as an engineer than as a scientist. Scientists just figure out things mathematically and then they're finished. So yeah, that's good enough. No, I wanted to see the rockets go off, you know. So I became an engineer. But anyway, it's a hard-pressed industry to be in. Very nerve-wracking, a lot of tension, and that sort of thing. And as a result, my health wasn't very good. In fact, it was awful. I got to my mid to late 40s, and I was, well, I guess it could have been the standard American diet I was eating, and all of the smoking and drinking and late nights working till 2 o'clock in the morning, come home, grab a little bite to eat and some sleep, kiss the wife, and then back to work again. That kind of thing kind of wears you down after a while. So we were about to die, and then something had to change. Before I go on, let me give you a little disclaimer here. The views and opinions expressed in this lecture are my own and not any organization's. There's a reason for that, because I'm not a medical professional. I don't attempt to diagnose or treat diseases. I'm a scientist, and I use a scientific method on myself to get better. The scientific method, in case you didn't know, called observation and experimentation. It's really nothing but trial and error. See what works, see what doesn't work. I learned a lot more from what doesn't work than what works, because I had a lot more experience with that. In fact, I put that on my resume when I went out as a consultant. I would say, well, why should we hire you? I said, because I know a lot of things you shouldn't do. And they hired me, go figure. But so, I apologize in advance to anybody that may be offended by the things I say, but it's for the advancement of science, so who can argue against that? So maybe you'd like to try a little experimentation on yourself after I get through with this. Okay, so jumping right into it. Where's my AV guy? Ah, yes. Natural law. What is natural law as opposed to just law by itself? Well, according to the dictionary, it's a body of unchanging moral principles regarded as a basis for all human conduct, an observable law relating to natural phenomena. And that's a pretty good thing. We learned that in physics. It also was used in the founding of this country. It was the laws of nature and of nature's God. And we find that in the sciences there are these laws of nature. You know, go argue with gravity sometime. You're going to lose. Same way God put laws within our own being. And many of us try to go around and violate those laws all the time, and sooner or later we're going to pay the price for it. And my lovely wife and I were paying the price, like I said, way back when. So we decided to change directions, and we paid attention to what we had been told for years before in the writings of Ellen G. White. For those of you who don't know who she is the greatest health reformer of the modern age. And we've learned a lot from her. Let's talk about our healthcare system in America today. I looked up the current cost of healthcare in America, and it's $3.5 trillion per year. That's trillion with a T. That's 17.6% of GDP, and a whopping $10,376 for every man, woman, and child in this country per year. And since I spend essentially zero, somebody else is spending a lot more than that. So in fact, one lecture I did many years ago, one of the topics was free health care, that you can have health care for free. Believe it or not, if you follow these 8 principles, you're not going to spend any money unless you want to. But of course, like many folks, I was in the category of, oops, too late, I've already had a bad history with taking care of my health, so it's going to cost some to get back. So what's the result of all of this money we spend in America for our health care? The crude death rate in America shows that we're number 84 out of 225 countries in the world. But wait a minute, we're spending #1 spending in health care by a wide margin, yet we're way down the list in the crude death rate. Our health rate is worse than Iraq, Libya, Dominican Republic, Syria, Egypt, Iran, Venezuela, etc. We have 9.6 times the death rate from throat cancer as Gambia, 5.9 times the death rate from breast cancer as Mongolia, and 2.8 times the death rate from heart disease as South Korea. So what's the conclusion of all this? If our health care is so great, why are so many of us dying? Have you thought about that? The more we spend, the worse off we are? As a scientist, I'd say there's something backwards about there. The trend is in the wrong direction. Maybe I should spend less and get healthier. Well, now that doesn't always work. You have to do it right, and hopefully these principles I'm going to talk about today will help us get there. Why are we sicker as a people than most developed countries in the world? You ever think about that? I mean, look at what we've got in the grocery stores. We've got everything you could want. People from other countries come here and they look at the shelves lined with such plenty and they say, oh, you people have really got it made. And yet they're healthier by and large than we are. Most third world countries have a very healthy populace. They live mainly on beans and rice and a few vegetables and once in a while a little meat, but mainly just beans and rice, which, by the way, are my favorite foods. And the other question is, why have we become sicker in the last 40 years, especially with such advances in medical technology? We have gotten sicker. Can the government actually provide better health care for all of us? I don't see anybody saying yay. Our diagnostic equipment is indeed the very best in the world. So maybe what we've got is a faulty paradigm. That is, we're thinking about it all wrong. So let's look at what's ailing us. Heart disease. Well, you know, bypass heart disease surgery is very expensive. And I find that about 50% of the heart bypass candidates come back for a retooling. Angioplasty, that is, the splints they put in, are temporary at best. Then there's cancer. Trillions have been spent on the war on cancer since 1971 when Nixon declared war on cancer. It's a $150 billion a year industry in America today. So the answer to the question is, how are we doing? Is we're losing the war. Well, there's 13% more cancer today than there was in 1971 when Nixon declared war. More people make a living off of cancer than actually have the disease. Now, what kind of a terrible statistic is that? And Linus Pauling wrote that everyone should know that the war on cancer is largely a fraud. Now, I would say that because I don't know much about anything, but Linus Pauling is a pretty well-known name, a Nobel laureate. You got to be smart. When he says it's a fraud, I can believe it. Diabetes has increased by 1,500% since 1958. Why should it? Our food is a lot better and more plentiful, and our medical care is all out there. And it's really improved since 1958. 10% of the U.S. population is diabetic. There are 1.2 million children that have type 2 diabetes. 70% of American men and 60% of American women are obese. And obesity is a terrible cause of disease in this country. So we see the poor old sick man down there at the edge of his bed. I'm getting there in age, but I don't want to get there in appearance like that. Not just the appearance, but Linda and I have talked, and she's the pretty lady in a red dress in the back of the room. But one of the reasons we do this health stuff is so that we won't be a burden to each other in our old age. I don't want her to have to spoon feed me or change my diaper. You know, I want to do that myself. No, not really. I don't want a diaper. But yeah, we don't want to be burdens to ourselves or to each other or to our children. So that's a good reason to stay healthy and take care of yourself. And I think God expects that of us. So what's killing us? Let's look at that. First of all, before I talk about what's killing us, I'll tell you a little story. When I turned 65, what was that, honey, 10 years ago? Or just before that, I had been going blind in one eye and couldn't see out of the other for some time. I had cataracts and couldn't do anything about it until I got to Medicare and could afford it. Well, when I went to go get cataract surgery, had everything set up, and I was supposed to go get it on Tuesday, I think, something like that. And they said, oh, no, you can't go. You haven't had your certificate from a heart doctor yet that says that you're capable of having the operation. I said, well, I'm healthy as a horse. I just need my eyes fixed. You know, that's the way us old redneck people talk. But they said, no, you have to go to the heart doctor. So I went to the heart doctor there in beautiful downtown Apopka. A nice young man, an Indian gentleman, but he was nice as he could be. And first thing he says to me, well, you know, Mr. Milan, that the greatest single cause of death in the United States is cardiovascular disease. And being a smart aleck I am, I said to him, no, it's not. And he looked shocked at me, and he says, well, what is then? And I said, abortions. And he said, oh, okay, well, it's the second leading cause of death in America. And I said, no, it's not. And he looked at me sheepishly and said, well, what is then? Medical mistakes? I said, bingo. If you take the combination of doctor, hospital, and drug mistakes, that accounts for the number 2 killer. Then you get what's on the list here, which is cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, respiratory disease, accidents, and medical mistakes. But whose fault is it? Let's take a look at our paradigm here. Is it our healthcare providers that they're not providing enough? Is it our insurance companies that they're not funding enough? Is it the government? They think they can provide health care. They don't provide health, and whether or not they care, I haven't determined yet. But I would suggest that it's the last one on the list. Our problem is ourselves. And I think it's because we have a faulty paradigm. First of all, we say, I'm not responsible for my health. I just caught the disease. Let me translate that. It's God's fault I'm sick. Now, maybe you've thought that way before, and some of us scientists would say, well, it's just a probability thing. It's a probabilistic determination. No, it's not. Or then we sometimes believe that we can cure any disease by eliminating its symptoms. Did you ever notice that? Whenever you go to the doctor and you say, oh, I got a cough and I got this, that, and the other, he gives you something to dry up the cough, stop the diarrhea, make the sneezing quit. Of course, you're allergic to all the pollen out there. Got to give you a drug for that. Not realizing that all of these symptoms we have, or really the elimination channels to get rid of the disease. When I have a runny nose, it's because there's toxins being driven out of my body through the runny nose. Or when I have diarrhea, there's a problem in the digestive tract that needs to be flushed out. So all of these things really aren't bad things, they're good for you. And third on the list of our faulty paradigms, it says for every malady that exists, there's a drug cure, although it may not have been discovered yet. So live it up, you can take a pill later. That's a faulty paradigm. And then fourth, giving more money for research will find a cure. I ask you the question, have they found a cure for cancer yet since 1971? With an increase in cancer of 13%, I don't think so. More money doesn't solve the problem. In fact, if you can see where the money goes, it goes to the big pharmaceutical companies, and they make lots of money off of it. And if you ever notice the names of the people that run a pharmaceutical company, check out the CEO of that company and see what his past job was. You'll probably find that he worked for the government, right in the Food and Drug Administration. And then you find people in the Food and Drug Administration that used to work for the top levels in the pharmaceutical companies. So it's kind of an incestuous relationship there. So where did we go wrong? Well, first of all, with our diet, we'll eat and drink anything because it's only the taste and the quantity that matter. For exercise, sometimes the only exercise we get are our fingers exercising on the TV remote or texting on our telephones. That's our exercise. Sunlight, we've been taught that we should stay indoors because everybody knows that the sun is bad for us. That's a faulty paradigm. Air, we live indoors in our cars, in our homes and cities, breathing polluted air that's recycled and run through mold-clogged filters. We've seen some of that in our home recently. We bought a new home a few months ago, and Linda's had this awful problem keeping the dust off the furniture. It just comes like crazy. So what we did was hire a company to come clean out all the ducts, and boy, was there a lot of stuff up there. It turns out that when they were building the place, apparently they didn't know that you're supposed to turn the air conditioner off when you're doing the drywall in there, and there was drywall powder just caked in those ducts. So we had that all cleaned out, and it's doing a lot better, right, hon? Not so much dust now. So we're going to leave off air. Water. We poison our own water by but rarely drink it. I can hardly read this. I don't know who printed this out, some guy.
Do you want light? Sarah, do you want some light?
No, that's fine, Pastor. Thank you. I can see it. I was just self-deprecating again. We do poison our own water. I mean, we add to it such things as chlorine and fluoride, and I'll talk about those in a minute, but they're not too nice. And rest, what's that? We got to make more money, so there's no time for rest. You've ever been there? I was there in the aerospace. Yeah, I climbed up to the top of the corporation, right up to the corporate ladder, and looked at the corporate God in the face and said, I don't want this. Climbed down and went in business for myself. Intemperance. Alcohol, tobacco, drugs, sexual obsession pervade our culture all the way around. You can't drive down the highway without seeing it splattered right in your face, let alone turn on the television. Immorality. Are we truly one nation under God or under somebody else? Now, as far as where we went wrong and the paradigm went under, I like to quote the famous words of Pogo Possum. We have met the enemy and he is us. We are our own worst enemies. So what can we do? There's two simple steps we can do to get healthy again. We stop causing the problem and we change the paradigm. Okay, stop causing the problems. I'm reminded in my physics background of Newton's laws of motion, the second one of which says for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if I eat some garbage, that is fast food, you know what garbage is, you're going to have a reaction. It's going to take a toll. And as a former smoker, I remember thinking, oh, just one more won't hurt me, you know, and yeah, I'll get along with it for a while, but sooner or later it catches up with you. So don't think that Newton was wrong. There is going to be an equal and opposite reaction, and it ain't pretty. I like the quote from Proverbs 26:2. As the bird by wandering, as the swallow by flying, so the curse causeless shall not come. In other words, if we have a curse in our health, it wasn't without cause. Somebody caused it, and it was us. In general, we cause diseases by the lifestyles that inhibit our immune system, ability to ward off the ravages of disease. If we live the 8 natural laws of health, we can stop these problems. Then we need to change the paradigm. Symptoms are not the problem. Our lifestyle is. Symptoms of a health challenge are simply nature's way of getting rid of that challenge. So let it work its magic. In fact, when the symptoms of a disease appear, it's a sign that the immune system has begun to battle the invader. Fever, swelling, sneezing, coughing, diarrhea, etc. are all part of the body's arsenal of defenses against disease. A feverish state causes a production rate of both red and white blood cells to triple. Now you need the white cells to kill off the bacteria and the red cells to bring oxygen, so tripling them when you're sick is a really good idea. And that's what a fever does. So don't fight the fevers, work with it. Unless it gets so high it's going to fry your brain or something. Now, histamines, you know about them. You get the swelling and take antihistamine drugs to get rid of it. That's not a bad thing. The histamic reaction, which causes swelling, is the primary thing that attracts lymphocytes to the area that needs it. So just let it run its course. And lastly, by attacking the symptoms rather than the cause of a disease, we hurt rather than help in our recovery. Now, wouldn't that be something? You think you're helping, but you're actually hurting. Now we finally get to the 8 natural laws of health, also known as the New Start. Now, where do these come from? Well, it came from the owner's manual. You know how when you buy a car, you get with it an owner's manual that tells you this is how to do the upkeep, this is the maintenance you need, this is the kind of oil you put in it, and that sort of thing. Well, we got a maintenance manual for the human body. It's called the Bible. And it says that these 8 natural laws are the things that are going to keep us healthy. It was written under the inspiration of the designer and healer himself. God designed our bodies, and He put within us mechanisms of healing that will take care of it. For the most part. I mean, if you get splattered out on the highway, that's, taking herbs isn't going to fix that. God promised, if thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that healeth thee. Now, they've done some archaeological studies on the diseases of the Egyptian mummies that they've dug up and found that, guess what? They got the same diseases we have in America today. They had cancer, they had diabetes, they had osteoporosis, all of it. But we don't have to have that anymore if we don't want to. In 3 John 1:2 it says, "Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth." So you see, God does want us to be healthy. And He's given us these 8 natural laws, and they are nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, air, rest, and trust in God. And it's a bright idea that we should pay attention to it. First of all, nutrition. Some scriptures on that. Genesis 1:29, "And God said, Behold, I've given you every green herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat," or food. Notice He didn't say, "I'm giving you hamburgers and French fries." He said He gave us essentially a vegan diet to eat. Fresh fruits and vegetables, nuts and grains. You can't get better than that. So meat is not essential for health or strength, else the Lord made a mistake when He provided food for Adam and Eve before their fall. As all the elements of nutrition are contained in the fruits, vegetables, and grains. And that's from Ellen White in Review and Herald in 1883. The perverted appetite was to be brought into a more healthy state, that they might enjoy the food originally provided for man, the fruits of the earth, which God gave to Adam and Eve in Eden. And we think of Eden as the perfect place, the paradise of God. In that paradise, there were vegan vegetarians. It's my understanding from the Bible that in the future, the paradise of God is in heaven, and we'll again be vegan vegetarians. Although I hate the word vegan, I'm going to change it and use something else. Vegans, true vegans, are the ones that throw paint on you if you wear fur or won't wear leather shoes, things like that. But I would like to call it a plantarian, so that you live primarily off of plants, or completely off of plants. Because milk doesn't come from milkweed, or eggs come from eggplant. There'll be time for questions at the end unless you have something very relevant.
The herbivore. There's already a word for it.
Yeah, I know, but I don't like it, so I'm changing it. It's plantarian. Get used to it. The whole world will adopt it soon. Not likely. Okay, yeah, I know about herbivores, dear. So, the daily nutritional requirements for human beings is not all that complex. We need proteins, although in the United States the average intake of protein is about 5 times what we need. So now some will say, well, that's good, we got lots. No, it's not good. Then you need carbohydrates. By those I mean unrefined, complex carbohydrates, and not the refined junk food type. You need fats and oils a little bit, but you shouldn't have the fats of animals, because it says in the Bible, it shall be a perpetual statute for your generations throughout all your dwellings, that you eat neither fat nor blood. Does anyone know of a butcher shop where you can get meat that has no fat or blood in it? I don't know of one. It's possible you could get some kosher stuff done that way, but who wants to eat blood anyway? Now you need fiber too in your body. Fiber is very important for mitigating blood sugar and for cleaning out the bowel, but there's no fiber whatsoever in meat. Oh, I'm going down the one I haven't even advanced the chart to. And lastly, we need vitamins, minerals, and enzymes. And you'll find plenty of those in plants, but not so much in meat. In fact, the only enzyme I know of in meat, there may be some others, but the main one is cathepsin. And that's the enzyme that causes flesh to rot. So, yeah, well, you don't want that, do you? You don't want to eat that. Don't eat the body rot. So what are our nutritional needs? We need energy. For energy, you need complex carbohydrates or starches, which just really turns into sugar. You need fats and oils, and you can make some energy out of that with difficulty. It's not nearly as efficient as carbohydrates are. The body runs on sugar, that is glycogen, which it gets from the carbohydrates, not refined sugars. And glycogen is stored in muscle tissue. There's no storage mechanism for protein. And glycogen is the thing that fuels your brain. So if you want to be smart, you want to think a lot, you want to get complex carbohydrates in your diet. I know there's a lot of folks that talk about all these Atkins diets and others that are high in protein and fats to drive the body into ketosis, which is where the ketones are going around eating up the fats and everything. But ketones are produced to make the body feel better when it's dying. So you don't really want to get into these high protein diets because it's not unusual that an athlete runner will be on a high protein diet and collapse and have a heart attack. And I'll explain some more about that in a minute. Now for our metabolism, we need vitamins, minerals, and enzymes. There's lots in plants, not any in meats. We need some cholesterol. Oh, well, you need cholesterol? Yes, you do. But you can make your own. You don't have to eat it. And you know, there's lots of cholesterol in meat, but there's none in plants. Not any cholesterol at all. So why do we have cholesterol? Well, for one thing, that stuff that we denigrate so much is clogging our arteries. It's actually like spackle. If any of you guys ever filled the holes in walls with spackling compound, you know what I mean. The fact that we have oxygen running through our arteries, oxygen tends to eat up our flesh a little bit. That's why you don't see any problem in the veins, because they don't have any oxygen in them. But in the arteries, the oxygen makes these little holes, and the good cholesterol that we make in our bodies, it goes around and patches those little holes up so we don't leak it out. Isn't that great? But if you get too much cholesterol and the wrong kind, you build a blockage, and then we have heart attacks. Now fiber, I mentioned earlier that it mitigates the blood sugar, it regulates it, and fiber is the cleanup crew in the bowel. There's a lot of it in plants, all plants. Even, you know, apples have lots of it. Apples have protein as well. And then we need nutrition for our bone health. We need calcium in a usable form. And by the way, plants are the best source of calcium and not milk. Milk is a worse source. Would you like to know why? Of course you would. Well, you know what protein is made out of? Amino acids. The second half of that is acids. Now, when you eat protein, it splits the protein up into amino acids in this whole ancient dietary law of we need a complete protein. We need to eat corn and beans together so we'll have a complete protein. That's nonsense. That was based on rats, and we're not the same. But anyway, whenever we eat a protein, it breaks down into amino acids. And if we eat too much of that protein, we got too much acid in our body and in our bloodstream. And if we get a whole lot of protein in us, like these athletes, we get acidosis, in which the heart doesn't like that and it gives up. But worse than that, the body has to run at a uniform acidity level, or pH. It has to keep the body's pH at 7.2 or slightly below in order to maintain all the many chemical reactions that go on in the body. So whenever we take a lot of protein in, we get a lot of this excess acid and our blood becomes too acid. So we're going to die unless the body does something. So you know what it does? It says, I got to buffer this acid with some alkaline. So where does it get it? From the bones. It leaches the calcium out of your bones, so that whenever we say, I'm going to drink some milk to get calcium, well, we drink milk and we get the protein out of the milk, but it takes the calcium out of the bones and we end up with a net loss. And they made measurements of people after they eat some protein, do a urinalysis on right away, and they find out that there's a lot of calcium in the urine. So it's not a good idea. Now let's take a little deeper look at our nutritional elements. Protein, what do we need it for? It's for growth, reproduction, healing, hair, and nails. How do we store it? You can't store protein at all. You eat it, if you don't use it right away, it goes out, and that and some of your calcium goes out as waste. It's abundant in animal products, and there's sufficient amounts of it in a vegetarian diet. A lot of people say, I can't get enough protein if I want to be a vegan. Got to eat them animals. Well, it's not true. There's protein in everything in the vegetable kingdom. Apples have protein. Beans have a lot of protein. Rice. Probably Cheerios have protein. Whole grains, yeah. Grains are good. Then there's carbohydrates. You need those for energies. And the glycogen that's made from the complex carbohydrates are stored in your muscle cells. Why there? Because that's where you need the energy to power the muscles. So when it's stored in the muscle cells and you want to go out for a run, it's got some energy there to make you go. And there's plenty of carbohydrates in the vegetarian system, and there's none in animals. So eating meat won't give you any carbohydrates. Now, fats and oils, you get all you need out of plant-based diets. For instance, some people talk about, well, I can't eat an avocado, that's full of fat, it's going to make me fat. Well, guess who designed the avocado? God did, and he knew what he was doing. So, do you know what it takes to digest fat? Lipase, it's an enzyme. Guess what? In the avocado is just the right amount of lipase to digest the fat that's in that avocado. And so it is with every whole food. If it has God's package on the outside of it, you can trust that it's well balanced and it'll be good for you and you can digest it. Next, we look at cholesterol. We already talked about that, how it's the spackling for the cell membranes. And it's stored in fat cells, the liver, and the arteries. Boy, does it get stored in the arteries, and they have to do a bypass operation on you. And there's a lot of it in animals and none in plants. And fiber is the other way around. There's a lot of it in plants and none in animals. And vitamins and minerals, there's numerous vitamins and minerals in all of the plants. And the more they study these things, the more they find out that the great things that keep us alive, that cure diseases, are coming from the fruits primarily, and vegetables also. But if you'll notice, everything that's colorful is usually cures cancer. You know, tomatoes, blueberries, you name it. When it's colorful, it's good for you. Isn't that strange? Wonder why that is. In fact, it appears to me to be strange that God designed these foods such that they'll be green on a tree. You can almost hear the Holy Trinity deciding what to do when they were discussing how they're going to make the earth. And they would say, well, how will they know when to pick this fruit? He said, well, we'll turn it from green to red, and they'll know how to go pick it and eat it. Now, wasn't that nice? They made it simple for us, knowing how some of us might be dumb rednecks. And lastly, we have metabolic catalysts of enzymes. It's stored in the gallbladder, and the only thing in the animals I told you before was cathepsin. Talked a minute ago about protein. I think there's a myth about protein, that we need so much of it. And we also noted that there's 5 times the amount of protein consumed on average in America as is needed. We only need 28 grams of protein today for an adult that's not healing or reproducing. It's needed for growth, healing, reproduction, hair and nails. And we talked about the complete protein myth of the 1920s. Now, you know, all plants contain protein, like I said earlier, but not an excess of it. You can eat all you want of any raw fruit or vegetable, and you're not going to get an excess of anything. It's going to take care of itself. What a designer, huh? And some of the effects of excess protein, we already talked about one of them, which was osteoporosis, leaching of calcium from the bones. But it also causes allergies, anemia, infant internal bleeding, type 1 diabetes. That's an interesting one. You know, we call it child onset diabetes, just like it's some magical thing that God doesn't care about the children and all of a sudden they get diabetes, and we call it type 1. I'll tell you what causes it. I was told by a famous Dr. McDougall. He said that sometimes children will have what's called a leaky gut syndrome, in which stuff that's in the intestine will leak directly into the blood vessels and go on from there to the rest of the bodies. And when they get cow's milk into their bodies, the protein in cow's milk mimics exactly the protein on the surface of the pancreas. So when that stuff leaks directly into the bloodstream without being digested, then the body sees it as a foreign invader, and it makes an antigen to attack it. And what happens? Yeah, it attacks that stuff, but it also attacks the surface of the pancreas. And you get child onset diabetes. Children were made to have their mother's milk, just like cows were made to have their mother's milk. But our children are not made to have cows' mother's milk, or calves' mother's milk. Atherosclerosis, arthritis, mad proteins called prions, which cause mad cow disease or spongiform encephalopathy. There's some speculation that that's a good bit of what we call Alzheimer's is really that mad cow stuff, because the biopsies on people with the brains of people with Alzheimer's looks just like the ones for mad cow disease. The excess of protein, we talked about leaching from the bones and causing osteoporosis, and the calcium buffering that's required to keep the pH of the blood at a constant. One other thing I want to mention is food groups. Boy, years ago, Linda and I used to have these charts on our refrigerators. It was food groups, what you're supposed to eat this together and not supposed to eat that together. And you've probably heard some really wacky things. I know I have. But we had one group here and one group there, and I was sitting there studying it one day, looking at those, and I said, "You know what, honey?" She said, "What?" I said, "These two charts don't agree with each other. So if we don't know which one's right, why should we look at either of them?" And I took them down. I said, "We'll just go by what Ellen White wrote, which was basically eat a wide variety of foods from day to day. Don't eat the same thing every day." Good. And the other was, don't eat mostly fruits and vegetables together at one meal. Have fruit and grain at one and vegetables and grain at the other. And that was about the only food combining stuff I could find that was inspired. Other than that, they were great charts. Do you remember the charts that we used to see in the schools years ago that had the food pyramids, which said you need a lot of meat down here and you work your way up and a little bit of dessert up at the top or something like that? Well, all of that stuff, if you look closely at the bottom of those charts, you'd find it always says, provided by the Meat and Dairy Council. So who do you think they're going to be selling? They're not going to be promoting vegetarian foods. Now let's consider just for a moment, speaking of that calcium leaching stuff, let's look at some world demographics. If we look at the amount of dietary animal protein consumed by a nation and compare it to the fracture rate, say hip fracture rate of the populace within that demographic, you'll notice a linear correlation. And if we look at the U.S. way up here, you see that we eat like 70 grams of animal protein per day. That's milk and meat. And we also get a pretty significant hip fracture rate. But if you take some like South African blacks, they eat very little animal protein. They use it almost as a condiment with mostly a vegetarian meal, and they never get hip fractures. And I think if you compare all along this line, the more of the protein you eat, the worse the hip fracture rate. Then you get up there to Scandinavia, those people live on cheese and meat. So now I want to talk about vegetarian diets. Is it for you? First of all, I want to talk about my friend Bruce. Now, Bruce and I worked together in the aerospace industry for many years, and he was a health nut, but of the ordinary kind. I was a special, crazy Seventh-day Adventist health nut. And I had left my job at Martin Marietta there and was gone for, I think, 7 years. I went to visit Bruce at his company. He started his own company because he was a smart guy. And I went to visit him and sat down in his office, and he said, "How you doing, Jerry?" And I said, "Fine, everything's fine." And I said, "How you doing, Bruce?" "Well, I got this problem, got that problem." And he said, "Are you still a vegetarian?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm a vegan now. I haven't had any meat or dairy in years, or eggs in years." And he says, "Well, you know, you won't be able to get your vitamin B12 and all this kind of stuff." And I said, "Well, Bruce, I feel pretty good. What symptoms should I be expecting to have, and how much longer have I got to live, do you think?" And he says, "Well, I got to admit, Jerry, you look pretty good for your age, so that's probably not the problem." So it turns out that we really can live without meat, and I've been doing it for the better part of 30 years now, and I'm not ready to keel over yet. But I want to tell you right off that I'm not condemning meat eating by anyone. It's biblically acceptable as long as it's not unclean meat. You can eat it. But to eat meat in America today that you're buying in the grocery store, I got to tell you, it's dangerous. You don't know where it comes from. If you raise the cow yourself and you've been feeding it and you know what drugs or no drugs it's been given, then you can be pretty confident about the meat in it. But when you go to Winn-Dixie to beef people and you get some beef, even if it was good, clean beef, it's not good for you. Yeah, years ago I let the doctor talk me into doing a colonoscopy because I'm old and I'm supposed to have one. Well, I didn't find anything wrong with me. But the guy that was doing it, another Indian guy, told me, you know, colon cancer is caused by meat eating. And I says, "Well, good, I don't eat any, so I should be okay." And sure enough, I was. You know, us people that are vegetarians are not better, but we are better off because of the danger in the U.S. of meat eating. If you're a lacto-ovo-vegetarian, you have a 9% lower chance of dying in the next 5 years than a meat eater person. If you're a vegan vegetarian, a plantarian, then you have a 15% lower chance of dying in the next 5 years. I'll take that. But what about dairy? Well, Ellen White wrote in Counsels on Diets and Foods, "But I wish to say that when the time comes that it is no longer safe to use milk, cream, butter, eggs, God will reveal this." From Counsels on Diets and Foods. Now, Bobby, you and I have been talking a lot about eating cheese and how hard it is to get off of it and how it's probably worse than eating meat. It's terrible stuff because of the chemicals in it. I mean, it's got its own narcotics in it. That's why you can't kick it so easily.
What about dairy products? I already talked about that. Now, look at us Adventists. Loma Linda is what they call a blue zone. And it's, Loma Linda, as everyone knows, is a nest of Seventh-day Adventists. But unfortunately, only 30%, a blue zone means that a lot of people there that live over 100 years. They're a bunch of centenarians. 36% of Adventists today are vegetarian. It was 49% some years back. Now it's 36%. 8% are plantarians. Only 8% of us are plantarians. But you can have a 7 to 10 year greater lifespan and quality of life if you become a vegetarian. That's a proven fact. I wouldn't mind living to be 120, should the Lord take that long to get here. Some people, especially young people, say, well, you're old. I said, yeah. I said, and that's what you want to be. I said, that's the object in life, is to get as old as you can. And I'm working on it. The meat diet is a serious question. Shall human beings live on the flesh of dead animals? The answer from the light God has given is no, decidedly no. That's from the book Healthful Living. Now let's take up exercise. Everybody loves to exercise, right? Right? No, not everybody does. Okay, who needs exercise? Everybody needs exercise. Kids. You know, they used to go out to recess when I was in school. Boy, we looked forward to it too. Yeah, see some nods from you gray-headed folks. That was a different planet? Yes, it was. It was. We had real teachers too. And we actually learned stuff. I liked school when I was young. By the time I got to college, though, I was tired of it, I got to admit. So I learned some junk in college. Yeah, kids will naturally get all the exercise they need if we don't saddle them down with things like video games, telephones, television, all that sort of thing. Now, us adults, though, that's another thing entirely. We don't naturally take to exercise. But the Bible says, if any would not work, neither should he eat. And if you know somebody's lazy, fill them in on that. So, no, you don't have to work. Come around tomorrow. If you work tomorrow, maybe you can have something to eat. Isn't that right, honey? Ask our son that. And the Lord took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and keep it. So as soon as we were created as a race on this earth, we were working for our supper. It wasn't an easy ride. And I don't think that heaven and the new earth is going to be any different. We're not going to be sitting around playing harps and looking at clouds and stuff. We're going to have a little bit of work to do because it's good for us and it's fun. He who formed man knew what would be for his best happiness. And he no sooner made him than he gave him appointed work. In order to be happy, he must labor. Testimonies for the Church, Volume 3. What are the benefits of exercise? Well, it makes you look good, as you can see. It gives you muscle strength and tone. Endurance. Speaking of which, you know that vegans have better physical endurance than any other group? It's a true fact. It gives you better flexibility, improved circulation and oxygenation, improved digestion and bowel function, improved sleep. Boy, I like sleep. Immune system health. And it's a lymphatic pump. Let me explain that. Y'all know how the lymphatic system works? We have lymph nodes, and they're located mostly down here in the groin area and up here in the armpit area. Now, why is that? And what does the lymphatic system do? Well, when we have the metabolism of our cells, there's biologic waste that each cell produces, and it goes into the fluid in between the cells, and from there it goes into the lymphatic system to be pumped around and eventually down to the bowel and out the back door. Well, there is no pump in a lymphatic system like there is in the circulatory system of the blood. So what makes the pump move? Moving the arms, moving the legs. That pumps your lymphatic system and keeps all the junk cleaned out of your body. Now, if you're going to get cancer in the lymph nodes, it's probably because you're not getting enough exercise. Isn't that simple? Why didn't that ever occur to us before? We're supposed to move. We're built for motion. And a boy, Chris, that's my son. It also aids in sickness recovery, and this one, it works, but I don't like it. In times past when I've been sick and laying there and, oh, I don't feel good, my wife says, get up, we're going for a walk. Walk? I don't want to walk, I'm sick. But it does, it heals you to get out and walk. Don't make fun of him because he's nodding off. I know I'm boring. The pastor's had a hard day. So what are the results then of insufficient exercise? Well, everybody knows that your muscles get weak if you don't exercise them. You use it or lose it. And they'll even atrophy to where you'll get very weak and can hardly get around if you just lay there. Speaking of which, have you ever watched veal calves being prepared for slaughter? I hate to even talk about it. They purposely make their cages so small that they can't move. And their muscles become very flaccid and weak. Poor babies. Anybody who's ever owned cows know that they're sweet. They're just sweet animals. They make good pets. You shouldn't kill them. I used to have a pet steer when I was a kid. Well, he was a little bull, but then my father changed him. And then when he grew up a little bit more, he sold him. And that broke my heart because I liked that steer. His name was Shiner. He had a big black spot on his eye. So you use it or lose it. And you also get stiff and sore when you use your muscles a lot when you haven't used them before. But that's because the lactic acid builds up, and the only way to get rid of it is exercise some more. And Chris pulls weeds, yeah. That's exercise, son. Now, also obesity, lack of endurance, protruding abdomen, chronic lower back pain. You know, if you have back pain, it's tied to your abdominal muscles. So if you don't exercise them to hold your back up straight, you're going to get some back pain. Low breathing capacity, intolerance to stress, elevated blood pressure, elevated resting pulse rate, increased blood fat levels, and increased cardiovascular risk, all from insufficient exercise. You know, we've been doing this hilltop food distribution every couple of weeks next door. And we started having a health screening table there where people come in, we measure their blood pressure and such. And we found some people with such high blood pressure. We said, get to a doctor right now. You know, some people are walking around with terrible numbers. I mean, 250 over 100 and stuff like that, just crazy. What about your exercise program? What do you do for exercise? You can do all kinds of things. You can run a marathon or you can lift weights. But I suggest you pick something that's fun. For me and my wife, we like to walk in the mornings. So we get up early in the morning, well before sunrise, study our Bibles, and we go for a walk. And along the way, we can talk and discuss our plans for the day. Linda will explain to me the meaning of life. And for you guys, I'll explain to you the meaning of life. If the wife ain't happy, you ain't happy.
We get to meet our neighbors.
Yeah, it's a great thing. We have a good time walking, and we see some of the most wonderful things. We see the little animals in the morning, the bunnies out scurrying around, and see the sunrise, and been seeing the nice stars and the constellations lately. It's been really nice. This weather is good for that. So pick something you like. Like I said, I like gardening and walking with my sweetheart. Yeah. Hey, I make no bones about it. Next year we'll have been married 50 years, so I get to talk about her like that. I mean, they said it wouldn't last. Okay, you also need to do some weight-bearing stuff to strengthen the bones. Do aerobic exercise. That means you still can talk. If you get to where you're such out of breath you can't talk, then you got to slow down a little because you're not doing any good. You won't burn any fat by being out of oxygen. You need oxygen to burn fat. Everybody knows that, right, Chris? Okay. Now, Ellen White wrote that perfect health depends upon perfect circulation. So, if we want our blood to flow good, we need to exercise. That is the right time. When do you need to exercise? Daily or several times a week at least. And it doesn't have to be strenuous stuff. You don't have to kill yourself. And I tell people, you don't even have to join a gym. If you want to get your exercise, just come over to Jerry's gym. I used to have 4 acres and a lot of work to do. And I said, you come over there and you'll get your exercise. It won't cost you a penny. So, yeah, useful labor and walking are the best exercises. You shouldn't do anything strenuous. And even a walk after a meal is helpful, but don't do a heavy thing. What about anatomically specific exercise? Like if I really want to beef up just my right arm and nothing else, can I exercise that alone? No, it doesn't work that way. As a matter of fact, studies have shown that I could, if I'm injured in my right arm, if I exercise my left one, my right arm will stay fit too. Isn't that a good plan? So what you need to do is just get the system moving, the whole thing, as much as you can. Walking, therefore, is the best exercise because it's the biggest muscles. Okay. What about no pain, no gain? That's wrong. If you got pain, then you're out of oxygen. Slow down. Fat burning and oxygen. You have to still be able to speak when you're walking and not be out of breath. And there are healing properties to exercise, as we talked earlier. When you're sick, even when you're sick, get some exercise. If you're injured and can't do much, do what you can. If you've got broken legs, exercise your arms, or vice versa. In conclusion, let your judgment be convinced that exercise, sunlight, and air are the blessings which heaven has provided to make the sick well and to keep in health those who are not sick. From Testimonies for the Church, Volume 2. Next we come to water. The next in our list of the 8 natural laws of health. Now, dihydrogen monoxide, which is also called water, or H2O, is the only substance that exists on this planet in all 3 states naturally. That is, liquid, solid, and gas. It's polarized so that it has surface tension, and that's why ice floats. Now, for those of you that can stay till the end, we have some questions and answers, followed by we'll be giving out some of these books, which essentially cover all of what we're speaking on up here. Like I said, the water is a perfect solvent for the human body, and our bodies are 60% water, the lungs 90%, our brains 70%, and our blood 80%. Vital to circulation, digestion, glandular secretions, respirations, temperature regulation, etc. We recycle all of it about 10 cups a day. We lose it through urine, exhalation, and water vapor, bowel excrement, and skin pore evaporation. Minimum amount of water you need a day is 5.5 cups. And that's unless you're at a higher temperature or higher altitudes. And death generally occurs when about 20% of our body water is depleted. And thirst is an unreliable guide for how much water intake you need. You should use this formula: drink your weight divided by 2 in ounces daily. So for me, that's roughly 75 ounces a day, or 80, depending on what the scale says that day. Okay, water on the inside. Yes? I don't know what you're saying. I'll talk with you about it later.
So you're trying to figure out the formula.
Anyway, let's talk about what's the best water to drink. I think this is the order you should look for. Steam distilled water. That's pure water. Next is reverse osmosis, bottled spring water, purified charcoal, filtered water, and last of all, tap water. And some people say, well, you need minerals, so you can't drink distilled water. So what do they put in them? Minerals, right out of the ground. But that's not the form that the body uses. You don't want rocks. You can only absorb about 5% of those minerals. What you want is the organic minerals that are combined with, or made in plants. The plants take the minerals out of the ground and they make things like calcium citrate. You take that and you can absorb it. But if you try to eat calcium carbonate or chalk, it doesn't do any good. Now, what's the worst water to drink? I found in my studies, it's the Orlando City water. We used to have a distiller when we lived and drank that stuff. We lived in that area and drank that stuff. And in the bottom of the distiller, we would find mud. A gallon of water would have that much mud in the bottom of the gallon jug. And the mud's not good to drink. It also has sodium fluoride. Do you know that sodium fluoride is the active ingredient in rat poison? It's also used to make the drug Prozac and make the sarin gas, and it's a carcinogen. But you say, wait a minute, fluoride is supposed to make our teeth strong, right? Well, there was a study done back in the 50s, I think it was, late 50s, early 60s. No, it was the 50s. Where was it? I'm on the wrong page. No, that's the right one. No, that's the wrong one. Yeah, that's it. There's a study done by Crest, toothpaste. And I was a part of that study. We were picked up from my little country schoolhouse and bussed into downtown Tampa and went to a dentist's office, and they cleaned our teeth and they gave us this toothpaste to use and everything. And I suppose it helped with cavities. I didn't really have much at that time. But they use calcium fluoride in those Crest studies. But that's not what they sell today. Today it's sodium fluoride, the rat poison. Now, you can speculate why they do that. I don't know. But one thing I do know is that the sodium fluoride is a byproduct of the aluminum industry, and there's a lot of it. It's very caustic and hard to store, and they want to get rid of it. So the thing they do is delete it and spread it out as much as they can, and that's why I think it's in all this stuff. But that's just my opinion, and I don't know anything. But you read down at the bottom there, it says, but I get plenty of water and coffee, tea, soda drinks, milk. No, you don't. For every cup of coffee you drink, you got to first have another cup of water just to counteract that cup of coffee, because it's a diuretic and it's going to flush out an extra cup of water. So, you end up losing. So drink the water is good. Water can be used for healing too, in all three forms: water, ice, and steam. And one of the things you can do with it is hot and cold therapy, where you put a hot, wet compress on and cover it over on a spot that needs healing, and then you do a cold one. And you alternate back and forth. The reasoning behind it is that hot and cold therapy is a blood pump. If you put a hot compress on your arm, for instance, it's going to turn red. It turns red because blood flows into it. Well, if you put ice on it, it turns blue because all the blood leaves. So there you go. There's a pump. I can make it come in, make it go out by alternating hot and cold. And you wouldn't believe the number of illnesses that you can correct with that, particularly when you apply it with prayer. And I've done that for several people. I've had a guy that lived across the street from me, had a horrible pain in his belly and couldn't get rid of it, and been to the doctors, and they didn't know what to do. So I says, I don't know what to do either, but lay down, I'll do what I know to do. And he laid down there, and we had prayer, and then I put the hot and cold compresses on him, and half hour later it was fine. Never had any more problem with it. The same thing with my brother. Had a knee injury that just wouldn't quit hurting, and did the hot and cold therapy on it, prayer over it, and it's gone. Now, I don't know why, except that God has pity on fools like me, and I know that He will multiply any little thing we do that's in consonance with His approved methods, which these are. So you can use ice packs that'll reduce swelling. And one good thing for a headache, I assume everybody knows how to do this. If you got a headache, put your feet in warm water, blood rushes to there, put a cold compress on your head, blood leaves there, and pretty soon your headache goes away. Then there's hydrotherapeutic bathing. Warm water's relaxing, cold water's stimulating. The contrast, turn the shower hot and then cold and back and forth, as hot as you can stand, as cold as you can stand, and you've got a blood pump going again, and that's a tonic for the whole body. Then you take herbal baths, which I like, and I'm looking forward to the cold season when we can take hot baths again, and we'll put a little bit of Epsom salt's a great one. I like that. That's magnesium sulfate. Good stuff. Another one that we learned from our herbologist friend was, I'll tell you about her in a minute, was bayberry, or the wax myrtle tree that lives around here. Oh, you know that one. Good stuff. Take the leaves off of that, boil up a big pot of tea of bayberry, and pour it into the bathtub. And it does great things for your whole body. Takes away your sickness. And next month we'll be having Dr. Keith Henry speak here, who does a lot of healing with herbs. So he's going to teach us all about herbs. Now I talked about the ones that Linda and I learned from, which was sweet, dear old Maud Scott. I don't know if any of you knew Maud Scott. I think she's probably passed away by now, but this was maybe 20 years ago. We were having her over here to give presentations in the Orlando area, and she would stay with us at our house. She was a dear, sweet black lady. And she told me the story that her grandfather's where she learned herbology. She had a PhD in herbology. And she told me she learned it from her grandfather, that was, her grandmother was a Cherokee, red-haired, blue-eyed Cherokee Indian. full-blooded. And the two of them married, and she learned herbology from her grandfather. But she said that Indian grandmother of hers died at the age of 132 years. And I said, wow. I said, well, Maud, what did she die of? And she said, silly, she died of old age. Maud was a dear. Next, we turn to sunlight. Sunlight's had a bad rap for years. We've been told that it causes skin cancer, wrinkles, and that ultraviolet is absolutely evil. But it's a health necessity. We need daily about 15 minutes on the face and arms. Particularly in this cooler weather, it sure feels good to get out in the sun. It makes vitamin D in the skin, where the ultraviolet light hits the skin and the blood goes through the little capillaries just under the skin, and the cholesterol in the capillaries is converted into vitamin D. And then it goes back through the rest of the body. That's how it's made. And vitamin D helps prevent dementia that is, prostate cancer, erectile dysfunction, schizophrenia, heart disease, and sunlight helps improve sleep and stimulates red blood cell production. I don't know whether it's in there or not. I wanted to mention that if you have a problem with depressions, you know anybody that has depression? Best cure is sunlight. Get them out in the sunlight. That and some of my extreme therapy, where I try to make them more depressed and it knocks them out of it. It's quite funny. I had a friend that used to do that too. He would be complaining, oh, life is so bad and this, that, and the other. And I said, yes, life is nothing but a dull, boring walk from birth to death, trying to fill up the emptiness of a meaningless existence. And I'd go on and on talking like that. Pretty soon he'd bust out laughing and he wouldn't be depressed anymore. I guess I'm a little bit sick like that. The sunlight will improve your sleep. That's a good thing. But there's an overexposure danger. If you get too much sunlight, you can get sunburn. Now, all of us in Florida know that. You get just a little bit at a time until you build up your tolerance for it. And there are some skin cancers, of which I have a problem that runs in my family with skin cancer. You should have seen my brother. He was all chopped up from going to the doctor and having skin cancers cut out. Now, I've had a little bit of it, but I usually take care of it myself. But the kind that kills you, the malignant melanoma, that's not caused by sun. It's caused, it's found like places on the back and places where the sun doesn't get you normally. Because the sun has healing properties. On the body, it kills acne, boils. It's good for rashes, psoriasis, and impetigo. Now, in the house, it kills bacteria, viruses, yeast, molds, and mites. It stimulates the production of red blood cells. It relieves depression, like we mentioned a while ago, and it improves your sleep. And again, Ellen White writes in Testimonies, Volume 2, if you would have your houses sweet and inviting, make them bright with air and sunshine. Wonderful, wonderful advice. Temperance. Let's get on to temperance. It's one of the 8 natural laws. True temperance teaches us to abstain entirely from that which is injurious and to use just judiciously healthful and nutritious articles of food, from the Health Reformer by Ellen White. But we've all been told that temperance is using everything in moderation. It's not. It's 100% stay off the bad and judiciously use the good. And you know, this whole sin problem that we have and that we're suffering from right now all started with Eve leaving her husband, walking through the woods, and snacking in between meals. If she hadn't done that, we wouldn't have a problem with sin. Satan had gained the victory over man in almost every temptation on the point of appetite. The Son of God saw that man could not of himself overcome this powerful temptation. Appetite is very powerful. You ever try not to eat something when you're hungry? It's a killer. I am. That's the next chart. Thank you, dear. She likes the pineapple story. Ellen White wrote in second volume of Testimonies, I'm astonished to learn that after all the light has been given in this place, many of you eat between meals. You should never, how often? Never let a morsel pass your lips between your regular meals. We try to practice that. But I know most people don't really think that's a problem. But it is. Agatha Thrash used to talk in some of her talks about an alimentary canal cleanse. And that it happened 5 hours after you eat a meal that the body secretes a cleansing stream that goes through the whole canal, through the stomach and through the intestines, and keeps you from having cancer. So I haven't read about that anyplace else, but sounds good to me. And Ellen White says never eat anything between meals. Well, how I overcame appetite by myself, well, it wasn't by myself, but how for me I overcame it was with a pineapple. In our house, whenever there's a pineapple to be cut, I always get the job because it's dangerous, I guess. And if somebody's going to cut off a finger, it ought to be me. No, not really, just because I'm stronger than the pineapple. So I chop up the pineapples. But any of you who've done it, you know that periodically when you're cutting up a pineapple, there's going to be this little ort that falls off to the side. Not really big enough to put in a food container to serve, but it's got to be doing something with it. You're not going to just throw it in the trash. So you pick it up and pop it in your mouth, right? Well, I got to that place when I was sitting there and that little chunk is there and I'm saying, boy, that stuff smells and looks good. I really want to taste it. But I was given the victory over that. One little piece of pineapple. But after that, I was able to go on a 3-day water-only fast without eating and things like that. You can get the victory over appetite, but it's through your will and God's power. Victory. It gives us victory over sin. The controlling power of appetite will prove the ruin of thousands when, if they had conquered on this point, they would have had moral power to gain the victory over every other temptation of Satan. But those who are slaves to appetite will fail in perfecting Christian character. Boy, that's powerful. The continual transgression of man for 6,000 years has brought sickness, pain, death as its fruits. And as we near the close of time, Satan's temptation to indulge appetite will be more powerful and more difficult to overcome. Particularly these days and times. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Have you ever noticed that many times people that have a problem with their weight, you'll find them drinking diet soft drinks, one after the other, thinking that they're going to get help from it because they're not taking in the sugar, so they won't be converted to fat. Well, the fact of the matter is that the aspartame or NutraSweet that's used in this stuff is actually a brain chemical that stimulates the brain to think that you're hungry and you want more. It also causes some little problems like brain tumors and such. But a lot of it's not our fault. We're overstimulated by the things that are being put in the foods, unbeknownst to us. It's our choice, though. God has given us the power of choice. It's ours to exercise. We cannot change our hearts. We cannot control our thoughts, our impulses, our affections. We cannot make ourselves pure, fit for God's service. But we can choose to serve God. We can give him our will. Then he will work in us to will and to do according to his good pleasure. That's from the book Temperance. Next, I want to talk about air. Air is important. As we all know that we can go for weeks without food, we can go days without water, but only a few minutes without air. Can't live without it. And by air, we mean mostly oxygen. 21% of the atmosphere over most of the earth is oxygen. If you go into the major cities, it's only 10% oxygen there. Did you know that? In the heart of New York, you don't get 21% of the atmosphere being oxygen. You're down to 10%. It's less than that in their sealed homes and offices. Oxygen-starved cells turn cancerous, which Dr. Otto Warburg proved in the 1930s and won a Nobel Prize for proving that cells become cancerous when deprived of oxygen. Then there's pollution in the air. In the mid-Pacific, there's 15,000 particles per cubic inch of pollution. But in our major cities, there's 5 million particles per cubic inch. That's a 300-to-1 increase in the cities versus out in the open ocean. There's home and office pollutions from the carpet to insulation to cleaning products. Then there's smoking. It's totally unnecessary, but it really clogs up people's lungs. And 60% of Americans live in areas which don't meet even the 1970 Clean Air Act standards. So what can we do? If you smoke, stop. And we have a program to help people get off of cigarettes. And one I like is my wife's program for getting off of cigarettes. We had tried to quit so many times. And every time, no matter what gimmick we tried, one or the other of us would slip and sneak a cigarette. And then the other one would say, well, if she's going to do it, I'm going to do it. If you've ever smoked, you know what I mean. That you would even pick a fight just to have a reason to go start smoking again. Yeah, we did. And she got this one gizmo this one time, because we'd quit and I'd quit and she'd quit, and then she'd go back and so I'd fall back too. Well, this one time she says, I got it smart. I found this product. Well, it was a little timer that said, okay, today you can have 20 cigarettes. The next day it'd go down by one. It kept going down and down and down. Finally, she got down to the day it said 1 cigarette, and she did. And then the next day it said none, and she says, throw that thing away. Then back up to the smoking. She was smoking 3 packs a day. I was only doing 2. So one day one morning she was out walking by herself in a neighborhood, which we like to do. You know, we get a little exercise, trying to be healthy, you know, and smoking while we did it, of course. And she was walking along, and she was so tired of trying to quit smoking and failing, and she said, God, God spoke to her and said, if you trust me, I'll take it from you. She didn't know whether it was audible or what, but anyway, she heard it loud and clear. And the rest of that day, she had no more craving for cigarette at all. And that went on for a couple of days, and even though she had the cigarettes laying right up there on the credenza, she didn't touch them. And then one day, an overwhelming urge hit her, just, oh, I've got to have a cigarette. If you ever had that addiction, it's just like any other heroin or whatever. In fact, they say it's more addictive than heroin. But she had that overwhelming urge. And as she did, she went beside her bed, went down on her knees, and said, God, you promised. And before her knees hit the floor, the urge was gone. And she never has had to smoke since. That's the way to do it. It wasn't that easy for me, but when she gave it up, I did too. And I fought it for a couple of years, and finally I don't think about it anymore. It's been many, many, many years. Yeah, if you can, move to the country, or at least get to a park as often as you can. Eliminate the noxious home cleaning products. Get indoor air filters, ionizers, and plants. You know, plants not only make oxygen, but they're great filters for the air. And next we come to rest for the weary. Look at that poor bear. That's a bear after my own heart. I've got the reputation for being able to fall asleep anywhere. I used to say I could fall asleep standing up giving a presentation like this. I never actually did it, but I'm sure I could. But one time I did, and this is a true story, I fell asleep while in the dentist chair getting a root canal and was snoring. Yeah, they told me I was pretty obnoxious. Now, why do we need rest so much? Well, it's our maintenance downtime. When you're asleep, that's when your body is healing. Rest is imperative. It's not just a luxury. It's repair time for metabolic damage. It restores our energy. It's a time when we eliminate waste. And everything rests. The heart rests between beats. The lung rests between breaths. The central nervous system rests during sleep. And the stomach should rest between meals. Remember the 5 hours we were talking about? That's why we don't eat anything between meals. Because if I've had a meal and I wait a couple hours and I start popping a few M&Ms like I used to have on my desk at work, well, suddenly the digestion cycle has to start over again. And you don't get the nutrients out of your food that you should. And what kind of rest do you need? 7 to 9 hours is best. And I got to tell you, I'm having a hard time getting even 7 anymore. Early to bed, early to rise is true. And we do a good bit early and we rise early. It's almost a miracle if we can stay awake till 9 o'clock. But then again, we can't sleep after 4. 3? You too? Well, I was 2:45 this morning. But every hour of sleep before midnight is worth 2 after midnight. So try to get to bed early and get up early. Because it's a beautiful world out there before daylight. If you can't sleep, what are some of the symptoms of sleep deprivation? You get depression, apathy. I'm not depressed. I think I might be apathetic, but I don't care. There's irritability and aggression. Causes of insomnia or anxiety, worry, and anger. Drugs that you might be taking. Lack of exercise. Insufficient water intake. Heavy evening meals. Don't eat anything heavy at night. You know, after, have a light supper if at all. And 60% of the sleep disorders are caused by poor sleep hygiene. And another thing about going to bed at night. Don't go to bed angry. If you've had an argument with your wife that day, apologize, get over it. You'll thank yourself in the morning. Yes, dear? Oh, really? Is that good? I'm sorry, I forget that stuff. Good plan. You see what that guy's saying there? Or the wife's saying to him, wake up, honey, I can't sleep. What's that?
It's a good way to get shot.
Or worse. Wow, I got a little idea. Okay, some sleep prerequisites. Let's go to the next slide. Exercise, but not too near a bedtime. Exercise helps you sleep good. You know, a hard-working man sleeps sweet at night. You need a quiet and dark place. Cities are not good for sleep. You need fresh air in the room. Ellen White said she'd always keep a window open even in the winter, just to keep lots of oxygen in there. Avoid late start projects, because you'll worry about it all night. Drink plenty of water, just like you said. And eat a small early evening meal, if at all. Avoid all drugs, including coffee, tea, etc. Avoid stimulants like TV and spicy food. And let not the sun go down on your wrath. That's what I was talking about. If you got anger with somebody, get over it. Sleeping pills tend to alter your sleep cycle, decrease your REM sleep, cause nightmares, and prolonged use worsens insomnia and leads to addictions. Getting ready for bed. Allow time to unwind. Don't bring your work home, guys. Take a warm bath or shower. That's if you're sick, particularly. If you've got a cold or a flu or something like that, the best thing you can do is take a nice hot bath, preferably put some Epsom salts in it or something, and then get in a nice warm bed and go to sleep. You'll feel better in the morning. Enjoy soothing music, take a nature walk, find a relaxing hobby, do a kind deed. You know, that's probably the 9th natural law of health, is doing a kind deed. Beneficence, the Bible says, is good for you. Also cheerfulness. A merry heart doeth good like like a what? Medicine. Yeah. Pray and meditate on spiritual things. I like to practice that, make my last moments before I go to sleep those of prayer. Ellen White wrote in Steps to Christ, our minds may be drawn out toward Him. We may meditate upon His works, His mercy, His blessings. Now here's a tip for any of you that travel a lot. I used to travel a lot and get jet lag. And I learned this. The things to do to overcome jet lag, particularly when you fly to Europe, work all day, get on an airplane, fly to Europe, and get up the next morning having to give a presentation at a company. Now that was pretty tough. And I would try to take a nap over there and everything, and none of that worked. So here's what you do. You get plenty of sleep the night before. In the flight, don't eat much. No alcohol or caffeine. Set your watch to the new time you're going to. And when you get there, believe it. Don't say, oh, what time is it back home? Or, oh, I'm tired. Just, you're a little tired that day, that's all. And you'll get through it and adapt quickly within a day or so. When all else fails, you can take herbal teas like valerian root, catnip, hops, or even geranium leaves. And you can take the hormone melatonin, which you can get in oral form these days. Another kind of rest is vacations. And hallelujah, a week from tomorrow, we're going to go on a vacation, which we say we richly deserve and hadn't had one in a long time. We're going to take a cruise. And really, 2 weeks once a year is not really a sufficient vacation. I see that some people are agreeing with me. Well, I don't know what to tell you, hon. I wish you could. I wish that we could have. In the past part of this year has been hectic. We've moved here, and that was awful. Most need to recuperate after a vacation. So that's why I say, is it recreation or recreation? You know? Where is it? Oh, right up there. Like that guy. He's been on vacation, but he's not doing too well because of it. And there's a hectic pace and schedules and all that, but as soon as we get on the boat, we're not going to worry about schedules. We're just going to relax for a week. Now, true recreation, God rested on the 7th day. So you need a weekly or so family recreation. Outdoors in nature is the best. There's something, you need to do something different than your work for recreation. I don't know anybody wants to do their work for recreation. You do? What do you do for a living?
Well, I'm retired now, but I was a torpedo target for the United States Navy for 28 years.
You were a torpedo target, and you loved it and want to be shot at some more? Yeah, I got a BB gun if you want to go over to my house.
It has to be 28 feet long and 28 inches in diameter, do 50 miles an hour to be interesting.
Well, my truck's about that size. Torpedo target that loves it. What a guy. Okay. Where was I? You need a leisurely pace with no deadlines. And it should be fun for everybody. Sometimes we'll want to take a vacation that may be fun for one person, but not for everybody else, and they have a miserable time. It shouldn't be competitive. It should be practical or creative. And the less expensive, the better. And most of us guys usually like that part. And God said, "Come unto me, all that are labor and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest." For if Jesus had given them rest, then would not he have afterward have spoken of another day? There remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God. For he that has entered into his rest, he also has ceased from his own works, as God did from his. Let us labor therefore into that rest, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief. That's from Hebrews 4:8-11. I like that seeming contradiction of labor to enter into the rest. Then there's the day of rest. Change the screen. Thank you, dear. The day of rest is creation's memorial. Sounds like a sermon we had today. Right, Pastor? He's getting even with me for falling asleep in his presentations. All right, let's all repeat it together. Honey, you ready? But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Amen. So there's a day created for us to rest every week, and we're doing it today. Well, you are. I'm up here tired. And then from Ephesians 3:9, and to make all men see what is the fellowship of the mystery which from the beginning of the world had been hid in God, who created all things by Jesus Christ. In other words, Jesus is our creator. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory as of the only begotten of the Father. Thank God for Jesus. He is our creator. Trust in divine power. Remember the story I told about how Linda quit smoking? It was all based on trust. God said, if you trust me, I'll take it from you. And she did. Cast thy burden upon the Lord, and he shall sustain thee. He shall never suffer or allow the righteous to be moved. He shall cover thee with his feathers. Under his wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Abide in me, he says, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine, no more can ye, except you abide in me. I am the vine, ye are the branches. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgiveth all thine iniquities, who healeth all thy diseases. And next, does anyone have a question that they would like to ask my wife? Or me? Yes, sir. I was a systems engineer in the guidance and control department. And then I did a lot of things. Mostly I got into night vision systems and video. Yeah, well, I started there in 1966 and stayed there till 82. And then I went to work for another company. We started our own company, and then got bought out by Westinghouse, and I worked for them for 2 years until I got sick of them and went out as a consultant on my own. But yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed getting out on the missile ranges and test firing. Made a lot of night vision equipment that went on the Apache helicopter and several other places. Did some work for the Navy as well as. Good stuff, isn't it? Okay, now you see this little book? It's just hot off the presses this week. And we have a copy for each one of you. That pretty little lady back there in a red dress will give you a copy as you leave. Anything else I can answer that's of simplistic nature? No? Okay. Then thank you all very much. Oh, wait a minute. One in the back. Yes, sir.
Why is it important what period of the night you go to bed? I get 7, 8, 9 hours sleep each night, but I'm a night owl. I probably don't go to bed before 11:30 at night, but I get my 8 hours sleep.
Oh,
Can I
my.
answer this one?
Yes, you may.
Okay, studies have shown that that every hour that you go to sleep and you sleep before midnight and after dark, okay, is worth 2 hours of actual sleep. And every hour after midnight that you sleep is only worth the 1 hour.
Yeah, I said that right.
Yes. So if you go to bed at 8 o'clock, and between 8 o'clock and midnight is actually 4 hours, so you're getting 8 hours of actual sleep. So if you sleep another 4 hours, your body is getting more rest than if you slept 8 hours from midnight to 8 o'clock in the
Am I shortening my life if I go to bed at 11 o'clock versus 9 o'clock?
You're not getting as much rest. Your body's not getting enough dark time rest. That's what studies show. You would be even more rested. That's the thing. Did I answer that? Did you,
I'd say let the little lady with the red dress back there beside you, let her answer it. She used to be a night hawk. She wouldn't get to sleep till 2 o'clock in the morning every morning. And in the morning I'd bring her a cup of coffee so she could have it with her cigarettes before I went to work. Now she gets up early with me.
We're in bed usually between 8 and 9, and we're up at 4 in the morning. Without an alarm clock. It's just automatic. It's a habit. And
Navy, huh?
Spent 96 years getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning on a rotation clock, but then they weren't what I was doing.
Yeah. Well, you didn't have any choice. Oh, they would shoot you if you...
Most of the time, I didn't have to be at work until 8. I came in early.
Well, we all...
I get my fun out of going to work.
Yeah.
Working for the best country in the world. Perfect test of weapons systems that save lives, don't kill.
Yeah, I remember. We did a lot of missile testing. I even watched them shoot.
Pacific Ranges. Keep working.
I went up to Dahlgren, I guess it is, up there in Maryland, and watched them shooting Volkswagens out there at targets. Well, we called them that because it was the same size and weight as a Volkswagen. Those guns fired. Amazing stuff. Yeah. And we thank you for your service, as we do for all the military people. I don't know whether that answer was satisfactory to you on why you should go to bed early, but I find that if I turn it over to God and ask Him, when should I go, and I lay down in bed early evening and start praying, I will automatically be asleep and wake up whenever He wants me to. And I won't argue with which is right if He says that's what's to do. You're welcome. You're welcome, my son. Anything else? Anyone else? Okay. Well, get your free book from the little lady at the back.